This is Dr. David Banner, a mad scientist obsessed with genetic inheritance and a researcher for the US Army, aiming to find ways to enhance soldiers' strength genetically. After conducting experiments on animals, he developed a vaccine to boost the immune system. He approached General Ross to inform him about the effective vaccine and requested to test it on a soldier, assuring him of its success. However, the general completely refused, stating that tampering with the immune system is dangerous and foolish. He also warned him against conducting human experiments, convinced that David was nothing but a madman. After his request was denied, David, in his madness, began experimenting on himself, which was extremely dangerous. Days later, his wife surprised him with the news that she was pregnant. She gave birth to a son they named Bruce. David was very anxious about his son, suspecting that something genetic had been transferred to him due to the experiments he had conducted on himself. A year later, the mad David secretly continued experimenting on his son. Tests revealed a strange green substance growing rapidly in the child's blood. He kept conducting tests until General Ross discovered blood samples in the lab and confronted David, as he had previously warned him against human experiments. This led to Ross destroying the lab, which infuriated David. In his rage, David activated a nuclear destruction device with gamma rays to destroy the facility. An immediate evacuation was ordered, and David's wife took their son and hid under a table. When David returned home, enraged, he confronted his wife, took her into their room, and left the child alone. They argued loudly in front of the boy, with David declaring that their son must die. He explained to her about the genetic experiments he had conducted on himself and their son, which had resulted in creating something other than their child. He warned that Bruce would become a dangerous monster in the future. David then left the room, fetched a knife, and attempted to kill his son. His wife tried to stop him, but in the struggle, David accidentally stabbed her in front of the child, killing her. Bruce woke up from the recurring nightmare that had haunted him even as a teenager. He always dreamt of the same nightmare, but would wake up unable to remember anything. He also had no memory of his parents or what had happened when he was a child. He was raised by a woman named Monica, who adopted and cared for him after he lost his family. Years later, Bruce grew older. Every time he shaved, he would see his eyes turn green in the mirror. He then went to work, where he met his girlfriend, Betty, the daughter of General Ross, who had arrested Bruce's father and ordered his imprisonment for what he had done. Bruce and Betty were researchers in a lab dedicated to creating and exploring medical solutions. The lab was their joint venture. Betty informed Bruce that a review presentation was scheduled for Tuesday and that they needed to prepare for. They were working on a project to cure cancer patients using chemical compounds. They began testing on a frog using gamma rays and nanomedicine devices. However, the results showed that the frog's cancerous growth continued instead of being cured, eventually causing it to explode, marking the experiment as a failure. The next day, Betty's former colleague, Glenn, approached her at work, offering to buy the lab for a good sum of money on behalf of her father, who was against her continuing in this field due to Bruce's father's actions. Betty was unaware of her father's involvement in the offer and refused it outright. Later, Bruce, who had always had a strained relationship with Glenn, entered the scene. As Betty was leaving, she encountered a new janitor who turned out to be Bruce's father. David recently escaped from prison. When Betty asked about the previous janitor, David told her he had died and that he was the replacement. Once everyone left, David entered the lab, sabotaged the machinery, and prepared a plan to release gamma rays throughout the lab, intending to awaken the monster within Bruce. Bruce continued to have nightmares, this time seeing a strange green creature. When he woke up, he heard a strange noise outside his house. Looking out the window, he saw his father standing with 3 dogs. Bruce closed the window and reopened it, but no one was there, thinking it was just his imagination. Meanwhile, David returned home and experimented on animals, turning them into giant, dangerous creatures using stolen chemical compounds from the lab. The next day, Bruce's colleague discovered a malfunction in the machine. While attempting to fix it, he damaged a circuit, causing gamma rays to be released. Bruce quickly rushed to save his colleague, wearing protective gear and pushing him away. He tried to stop the machine, but failed. In the end, Bruce ran toward the machine, absorbing all the gamma rays into his body, which awakened the monster within him, a giant green creature with immense strength that emerged in moments of anger. Bruce later woke up in the hospital unharmed. Betty visited him, astonished that he was still alive. Bruce, equally surprised, couldn't understand how he survived and mentioned feeling stronger than before. He continued to have nightmares, seeing the green creature again. When he woke up, he found his father sitting in front of him, who revealed that he was the man Bruce had seen outside the window with the 3 dogs. David told Bruce his name was Bruce Banner and began explaining that he is father and his mother died from 30 years ago, and he was imprisoned as they thought he was a mad scientist, but he is completely reasonable. The telephone rang, but his dad prevents him from answering. She was pity his father was preventing him from contacting her because of his father, but he didn't believe him, so he ordered him to get out, so he got out. He continued experiments on a rat who turned it into an enormous rat. In a late night, Bruce was in the lab. He started recalling memories that confirmed this man was indeed his father. He remembered his violent father who had attacked him and tried to kill him. Bruce suppressed his anger, began transforming into the giant green creature that always appeared in his nightmares. Bruce fully transformed and became the Green Giant. In a fit of rage, he started destroying the lab along with all the equipment inside. He picked up the nanotechnology devices and threw them outside the lab, where they landed on police cars, smashing them. Then he saw his father watching him from behind the door. Bruce approached him until he reached him. His father stepped closer as well, unafraid, placed his hand on Bruce and said, "My dear son." Bruce felt calm and overwhelmed with happiness, and remembered that he is really High Father, but remember also his cruelty. Soon after left and walked out, not knowing where he was headed. David was deeply saddened because he had lost his son, or rather his creation, which he had always designed to control. He realized Bruce would always hate him for what he had done. The next day, Betty went to Bruce and found him asleep, his pants strangely torn. She told him there had been a massive explosion at the lab the previous night, and assumed Bruce had been there, but he replied that he hadn't. He told her he had a very strange dream. Bruce believed everything that happened to him the previous night was just a dream. He began to recount how he saw himself as a giant, incredibly strong, leaping great distances off the ground, screaming in anger until he transformed into a giant creature. He also mentioned the new janitor with the 3 dogs whom he met the previous day and claimed to be his father. Later, Betty's father entered the scene. He showed them Bruce's ID to prove he was at the lab during the explosion. It became clear he knew Bruce was the son of the scientist David, who had been imprisoned. He then ordered his daughter to leave so he could talk to Bruce. Betty left, and her father questioned Bruce about the whereabouts of his fugitive father, whom he had been searching for all along. He suspected Bruce was hiding him, but Bruce swore he didn't know where his father was, or even that this man was his father. He said he had always thought his parents were dead, and confirmed he had no memory of his childhood. The commander began telling Bruce about his insane father, who had been imprisoned for his crimes. However, he concealed the truth about Bruce's father murdering his mother, realizing Bruce genuinely had no memory of it. In the end, Bruce was removed from his job, the lab was shut down, and he was warned to stay away from the field entirely and forget about his father's work. He was also warned to stay away from Betty or he would face imprisonment. Betty found her father's address and went to see him. She talked to him about Bruce, saying he was at the lab during the explosion and was involved in what happened, but he couldn't remember anything. All he recalled was that David was there too and claimed to be his father. She wanted to know the truth. David warned her to stay away from Bruce because he was dangerous. Betty was puzzled and didn't understand what he meant. When she removed the scarf from her neck, David moved closer, sat beside her, and secretly took the scarf without her noticing. It was evident he was planning something. He spoke briefly with her before opening the door for her to leave. Later that night, David took the scarf to his 3 dogs, which he had transformed into extremely dangerous giants. He used the scent from the scarf to track her. Meanwhile, Bruce remained under surveillance, unsure of what to do. Shortly after, he received a call from his father, who provoked him to transform him to save Betty from the 3 dogs. This made Bruce realize his father was responsible for creating the giant creature within him, and that he was merely an experiment. He understood his father was evil and had never loved him. When Bruce tried to leave, he encountered Glenn, who took advantage of the situation to attack him. Bruce tried to stop him from escalating his anger and transforming. He told Glenn that Betty was in danger and needed to be saved, but Glenn persisted, pushing Bruce to his limits. Bruce finally lost his temper, unleashed his strength, and threw Glenn aside. He began transforming until he became the Green Giant. He confronted Glenn, threw him out, destroyed the house, and left. Outside, he faced guards who fired at him, but Bruce was unaffected. His strength grew with his anger, and his size increased even more. In the end, he destroyed everything in his path and headed toward Betty to save her. Betty heard strange noises outside, and when she went to check near the trees, she saw a giant green creature. She was shocked to realize it was Bruce. Bruce still recognized her as his beloved and was fully conscious in her presence. Shortly after, the 3 dogs arrived. Bruce carried Betty into a car, and a battle ensued between him and the dogs. Bruce managed to defeat them all after a long struggle. When it was over, he looked at Betty with sadness, then then walked toward the water, reflecting on himself until he gradually returned to his normal form. Betty took him inside the house, covered him, and let him rest. He told her that gamma radiation was the element that completed the giant creature within him. Betty realized that his father had sent the 3 dogs to provoke Bruce into transforming and testing his strength. However, Bruce overcame them and saved her. The next day, Betty called her father and revealed the truth about Bruce. She asked for his help as he was the only one who could assist him. She did this out of fear for Bruce and her love for him. She requested safety and a promise that Bruce would be unharmed. They waited until he left the house and sedated him with a tranquilizer dart, causing him to lose consciousness. They then took him to a remote military base in the desert. They returned to the ruined house where he had lived as a child and descended into a secret lab buried deep underground. They planned to imprison Bruce there for life. Betty discovered her father had broken his promise to her when he ordered Bruce to be imprisoned for life instead of helping him. Desperately, she asked for a chance to find a way to cure Bruce, confident she could help him, but her father refused, saying helping Bruce was impossible because he posed a danger to her and all of humanity. He ordered her to stay away from Bruce, forget about him entirely, and never contact him again. In the end, he put her on a plane and sent her back home. Meanwhile, he sent military forces to capture David after discovering his location. However, David had already escaped and was conducting experiments on himself, the same experiments he had performed on Bruce using gamma radiation and the nanotechnology devices he had stolen from the lab. After completing the experiments, he noticed that the blood on his hand didn't spill. His body healed itself, and his hand began transforming into that of a chameleon, the creature whose genes he had experimented with. David's body began to transform into the color and texture of whatever he touched, making him entirely different from Bruce, and he becomes evil and very powerful. Then a security guard enters after suspecting something was wrong, but David tangled the guard's leg with the iron beneath him, causing the guard to fall to the ground. With brutal force, David picked up the electric machine and struck the man until he died. While Betty was returning, she was surprised to find David at her place and wondered how he got in despite the guards outside her house. She asked him what he wanted from her. He replied kindly, saying he wanted to see his son, and asked her to inform her father that he was ready to surrender himself, but on the condition that he gets to see his son, Bruce. Returning to Bruce, Glenn Gilo was torturing and shocking him with an electric device, trying to make him angry and transform, as he planned to take a sample of his genes to create something unique, aiming to amass enormous wealth and become a famous scientist. However, all his attempts failed. He realized Bruce could control his anger to avoid transforming. In the end, they placed him in a glass tank filled with water and stimulated his brainwaves with electromagnetic pulses in the area responsible for mood and depression control, trying to anger Bruce and force a transformation. Bruce started to remember his mother and dream of the same nightmare when his father took a knife and killed her. This led to Bruce's breakdown and anger until he began transforming into the green giant. He shattered the glass tank and escaped. They tried to sedate him to calm him down, but the sedative had no effect. All their attempts failed, and they couldn't control him. Finally, they sprayed him with solid foam until they managed to subdue him. Glenn approached him, intending to take a sample, but Bruce regained his strength and freed himself. Then he destroyed the place and defeated them all. In the end, he escaped, running toward the desert, leaping great distances until he reached an abandoned house. He realized it was their old home and remembered the day his father was arrested after killing his mother. After a while, the military forces attacked him, firing cannons. Bruce, in his rage, attacked them and destroyed their tanks. Bruce was immensely powerful, and no one could stop him. Then he continued his escape until he reached a field full of grass. He stood there, reminiscing about how his mother used to love planting such grass when he was a child. Suddenly, the military forces appeared again, this time with Commander Ross, who had been chasing him, trying to eliminate him. They started firing at him, but Bruce managed to fend them off. He even caught the missiles thrown at him, removed the explosive part with his teeth, and threw it at the planes, easily destroying them. Bruce destroyed the planes and then escaped, running until he completely disappeared from their sight, leaving them clueless about his whereabouts. However, the commander deduced that Bruce was heading to the city towards Betty because he loved her. He called her to inform her that Bruce had escaped and was coming to her, asking her to stay put until Bruce arrived. At that moment, Bruce had reached the city and was hanging from the top of a bridge. The air forces arrived, and there was almost a collision between two planes, causing one pilot to lose control of his aircraft, heading rapidly towards the bridge. Bruce noticed the pilot's life was in danger, so he quickly jumped onto the plane, diverted its course from the bridge, and saved the pilot's life. When When they managed to capture him, Commander Ross ordered the pilot to pull him out of the atmosphere to get rid of him, despite Bruce saving the pilot's life. After leaving the atmosphere, Bruce began to weaken until he lost consciousness and fell into the water. They continued firing at him. Betty watched what was happening to him and felt deep sadness for him. She called her father, begging him to stop the shooting because it would only make Bruce angrier, stronger, and impossible to kill. She pleaded for them to give him another chance to calm down, as Bruce would immediately calm down and return to his normal state upon seeing her. Bruce emerged from underground, extremely angry. The planes arrived and they had ceased fire. Bruce, thinking they were still pursuing him, picked up a rock from the ground, intending to throw it at the plane. But he stopped immediately when he saw Betty with them. Bruce calmed down completely upon seeing her and stopped attacking anyone. When Betty approached him, Bruce began to revert to his normal state, eventually collapsing into her arms. Afterward, they brought David and fulfilled his request to see his son. They placed them in a room equipped with laser beams designed to incinerate anyone attempting to escape. This was Commander Ross's plan, as he had always wanted to eliminate them. Ross began recounting to David, sorrowfully, how he could vividly remember his mother's face after seeing the desert flowers she loved. She always smiled at him when he was a little boy. Ross was deeply saddened by his mother's memory. David hugged him, pretending to be moved, and tried to exploit the opportunity to absorb his power, which was his real motive for wanting to see Bruce. David tried to act evil and powerful to overpower Ross and avoid being controlled by him, but Bruce pushed him away and became extremely angry at him. In the end, David grabbed an electrical cable and absorbed all the energy in the area. Everyone was bewildered by what was happening. David transformed into a colossal being, and Bruce also began to transform. They both ended up in a remote, rocky area. Bruce saw his father transforming into a massive rock-like giant. He rushed at him, attempting to destroy him, but Bruce noticed that by doing so, his father was absorbing his power just by touching him. He realized he couldn't defeat him. His father was determined to take the power that had been the cause of its creation. When Bruce could no longer bear it, he shouted loudly, telling him to take it. David began absorbing all his energy. At that moment, the military forces tracked their location, and Commander Ross ordered a nuclear missile to be launched at them, eliminating them. A year later, Betty constantly thought about Bruce and often looked at the green trees as they reminded her of him. In the end, a small village appeared, occupied by a gang. There was a doctor, different from the vibe, different from villagers, treating children. The gang took all their possessions, leaving the people terrified except for the doctor treating the children. He stood up to them, the only one unafraid of them. When he appeared, it was revealed to be Bruce, the green giant. It turned out he was still alive and had been living there all along. The man continued to provoke him until Bruce became angry and began transforming into the green giant. And that's how the story ended. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you get all the new updates, God willing.